Hello fam, let's dive into this video.
Once upon a time, in the heart of Choba, there stood a quiet little shop with a sign that read in bold red paint, Adako's signature. From the outside, nothing seemed special. The shop had a usual wooden door, dusty glass window, and one old sewing machine inside. But those who entered swore the place was not ordinary. They said clothes inside felt so real, as if the fabric itself had a pulse. Mama Nido, the owner, was always cheerful, and her hands moved faster than her mouth. She could sew an entire gown while humming old Igbo lullabies. She would often joke with herself as she walked. Who needs Ankara when you can stitch destiny? Who needs lace when you can wear power? Customers came for her clothes because they were different. When you wore Adako's signature, people noticed you at a glance. They couldn't explain why, but they remembered you. And in Choba, where everyone wanted to outshine the next person at weddings, burials, and Sunday service, that was enough reason to keep Mama Nido's shop busy. But no one really knew what went into those clothes, not yet. Long before Mama Nido became the queen of tailoring in Choba, she had another life. Years ago, she worked as a cleaner in a government mortuary. Her job was simply to mop the floors, wash the instruments, and occasionally dress the dead before their families came to claim them. It was there she discovered her strange gifts. One night, while alone, she noticed a body covered with a white sheet. Something about the skin drew her closer. It was firm and still warm from the embalming process. On a reckless impulse, she cut a small strip, slipped it into her bag, and took it home. At home, she experimented with it. She soaked the piece in bleach, pressed it onto a hot iron, and stretched it carefully. To her shock, it behaved like fabric, stronger than leather and softer than satin. She laughed until tears rolled down her cheeks. "See me, oh," she said, waving the strip in the air, tailored to the living and the dead. From that day, she never looked at her job the same way again. Whenever unclaimed bodies were scheduled for burial, Mama Nido would collect her share. Tongues, eyes, patch of skin, even teeth, all were carefully wrapped and hidden under her uniform. No one complained, not even the family members of the dead. They all believed her when she said, "Don't worry, I'm just making sure your loved one looks perfect for the coffin." At night, her one-room apartment turned into a workshop. She treated each body part like precious material. She boiled, bleached, stretched, and pressed them flat. She stitched them into patterns. Tongues were arranged like flames on a wrapper. Eyes were embroidered on sleeves, and teeth set in neat rows around collars. What shocked her most was how well it worked. The parts blended perfectly into the clothes, disguised as a unique design. And Mama Nido had fun with it. She would hold up a blouse and giggle. "Ah, Chinedu, see your teeth shining on this shirt. You always wanted to be a fashion designer." Sometimes, she even spoke to the parts while sewing, as if they were apprentices learning under her. "Hold the hem tight though, my dear tongue. Don't fall off. You know how much your owner used to talk," she would joke. For her, it wasn't horror, it was art, fashion like no other. And soon, the dead and the living walked Choba together, stitched into every thread of Adako's signature. Every customer who entered Adako's store quickly realized that Mama Nido's shop had its own special way of doing things. Unlike other tailors who measured waist, hips, and breast, Mama Nido asked one question first. "Which part do you want to carry?" She never explained it like a horror movie. She said it with a smile, like a fashion consultant helping you choose colors. Her voice was always smooth and persuasive. "If you want eloquence, take the tongue." She would point to a sketch of a gown with swirling tongue patterns. "If you want vision, take the eyes." She would show an agbada with embroidered eyes scattered all over like stars. "For boldness, take the teeth. For beauty and fertility, take the breast. For wisdom, take the head." It all sounded harmless and exciting. Who wouldn't want their clothes to carry such powerful symbolism? The customers thought it was just embroidery, just art, but they didn't know she was dead serious. Behind the curtain, Mama Nido worked with frightened precision. The fabric wasn't imported lace, it was processed flesh. The designs weren't creative stitching, they were thin body parts disguised to look like threads and beadwork. She hummed while she walked, with her scissors snipping like a heartbeat. "Which body parts do you want to carry?" The phrase echoed in her shop like a prayer. And the customers, too blind with vanity, never suspected anything. They wore their new clothes proudly, unaware they were carrying the dead. Ofunne Okore was the loudest woman in Choba. She loved knowing everybody's secrets and spreading them twice as fast as she heard them. When she heard about Mama Nido's shop, she rushed there at once. She stood with her hands on her wide hips, grinning. "Mama Nido, give me that tongue gown. I want people to hear me louder than the town crier." Mama Nido chuckled knowingly and sold her a wrapper embroidered with neat, red tongue-like patterns. "You will never lack words," she said as she handed it over. At first, it worked like magic. When Ofunne wore the gown to the market, her gossip was sharper than ever. She roasted people with her words, making crowd laugh till their stomach hurts. Chiefs, traders, even pastors trembled when she opened her mouth. But it didn't stop there. Soon, she couldn't control her tongue anymore. Secrets poured out of her mouth without warning. She blotted out her neighbor's hidden pregnancy, confessed her best friend's abortion, and exposed the chief mistress all in public. The crowd laughed, but fear followed. One Sunday, during church service, Ofunne suddenly stood up and shouted, "Pastor, you stole church money to buy your new car." The congregation gasped, and the pastor fainted before he could even defend himself. At home, it grew worse. Her husband came back one night, and before she could stop herself, her mouth betrayed her. "I know about that your girlfriend in Ozobao, and the child you are hiding there." The man froze, then ran out immediately. He never came back after that day. Her neighbors begged her, "Ofunne, please keep quiet." But she couldn't. Words spewed from her mouth like water from a broken pot. And at night, the horror began. Her tongue swelled to the size of a yam, stretching her lips until she couldn't close her mouth anymore. She would choke on her own words, with saliva pouring down her chin, while in the mirror, her reflection smirked and whispered things she hadn't even thought. By morning, her voice was hoarse, but still, she couldn't stop talking. Choba renamed her Ofunne the Parrot. She had truly gossiped her way into disaster. The next was Ebube Nnamdi, a quiet school teacher, the type who blended into the crowd. His students barely noticed him, and even at staff meetings, his colleague often spoke over him. He longed to be noticed, to have a presence that commanded respect. So when he stepped into Mama Nido's shop and she asked the question, "Which body parts do you want to carry?" he didn't hesitate. "The eyes," he said firmly. "I want people to see me." Mama Nido's eyes widened as she pulled out a shirt embroidered with dozens of tiny eyes stitched across the chest and sleeves. "This will open your vision," she said. At first, Ebube was thrilled. The very first day he wore the shirt to class, his senses felt sharper than ever. He noticed details he had always missed. If the principal was heading towards his class, Ebube could spot him long before he reached the door. During exams, if a student copied directly from a textbook, Ebube could tell immediately. His eyes seemed to scan and recognize the very page the words came from. His newfound sharpness made him very powerful. But the gift turned sour too quickly. One evening, while marking scripts, he noticed movement on the wall. When he turned, dozens of shadowy eyes stared back at him. He gasped and rubbed his own eyes, but the visions remained. Days later, it worsened. In the market, he saw dead relatives standing among the living with their eyes fixed on him. At night, he dreamt of cops watching him through the windows and calling him to join them. His shirt no longer looked like fabric. The embroidered eyes now moved, darting left and right. At school, his students giggled nervously whenever he walked in. One bold boy shouted, "Teacher CCTV, he can see everything now." The nickname spread like wildfire. Children followed him on the streets, chanting it. Ebube's life collapsed into fear. He walked with his head down, muttering prayers and covering his shirt with jackets. But the eyes never left him. Every corner, every shadow, every reflection carried their gaze. In Choba, people whispered that teacher Ebube could now see too much, but no one envied him. The next was Nicholas, a reckless young man with too much money and too little sense. He loved showing off at clubs and weddings, always the loudest and always the flashiest. When Mama Nido asked him, "Which body part do you want to carry?" he grinned. "The teeth," he said, flashing his own golden-plated smile. "I want to look sharp, sharper than a razor blade," he said. Mama Nido stitched him a dazzling white agbada lined with neat rows of embroidered teeth around the collar and cuffs. It was perfect, exactly how Nicholas wanted it. At first, the magic worked. People noticed his smile more than ever. Women giggled when he flashed his teeth. Men admired his confidence, and he became the center of every conversation. But then, the biting started. One night at a bar, he chewed his lips until it bled. The next morning, he bit his own tongue so hard that he screamed. Soon, he couldn't stop. He chewed on pen caps, his fingernails, even the edge of drinking glasses. One fateful day at a friend's birthday party, he burst into loud laughter. Suddenly, his teeth began falling out one by one, clattering onto the floor like spilled curries. Guests screamed in shock and ran out with their shoes on their heads. But before anyone could rush him to the hospital, new teeth grew instantly, sharper, longer, almost animal-like. A week later, he was invited to give a speech at a wedding. Dressed in his tutti abada, he stepped to the microphone. But when he opened his mouth, only guttural growls and snapping sounds came out. The crowd panicked, and before anyone could understand what was happening, he started chewing the microphone. That was the day Choba finally realized that Nicholas had bitten off more than he could chew. Another victim of Mama Nido's evil outfit was Ede, a widower who spent most of his days quietly sitting outside his compound. People in Choba often called him the man who thinks too much because he was always lost in thoughts. Deep inside, Ede longed to be respected for his wisdom, to be a man people came to for advice. So when he stepped into Mama Nido's shop and she asked him, "Which body part do you want to carry?" he didn't hesitate. "The head," he said with dignity. "I want to be wise." Mama Nido's eyes glowed. She handed him a simple but elegant outfit with strange head-shaped patterns stitched on the fabric. "Wear this and wisdom will follow you," she promised. At first, the change was wonderful. Ede began remembering small details, birthdays, old debts, and even forgotten conversations. When neighbors gathered, his words carried weight. People clapped and nodded when he spoke. They even started calling him Elder Ede, though he wasn't that old. But soon, something else started following him. At night, Ede heard whispers in his call. At first, it was faint, like an echo. But each day, it grew louder. The voice wasn't his, it belonged to someone else, the real owner of the head Mama Nido has stitched into the clothes. "Do this, do that. Unalive him before he unalives you," the whispers never stopped. Ede tried to ignore them, but they grew stronger until he began whispering back aloud. Neighbors often saw him sitting under a tree, arguing fiercely with no one. One afternoon, while addressing a small crowd, his outfit began to bulge at the shoulder. The fabric stretched grotesquely, as if another head was trying to push through the clothes. Women screamed and ran. Children shouted, "Uncle Ede now has two heads, so..." From that day, Ede was no longer seen as wise. He was seen as cursed, a man carrying two minds, and one of them wasn't his. By now, Choba was buzzing with fear. 4 different people had bought clothes from Mama Nido's shop, and all 4 had ended up ruined. Ofunne, the gossip queen, couldn't stop talking anymore. Ebube, the teacher, saw ghosts in every corner. Nicholas, the rich boy, had turned into a human dog with teeth sharper than knives. And now, Ede walked around arguing with voices no one else could hear. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some laughed, saying it was punishment for vanity. Others whispered that Mama Nido was a witch who had turned tailoring into a shrine. Mama Chisom, a fierce church woman with a loud voice, was the first to openly confront it. She stood outside Adako's signature with a Bible in her hand and shouted prayers at the door. This woman is not sewing clothes. She's sewing demons. Tailor for the dead, may fire consume your threads. Passerby gathered, some agreeing, others shaking their heads. A few mocked Mama Chisom, saying she was just exaggerating. The complaint eventually reached Inspector Oti Nwankwo, a no-nonsense police officer, but he only chuckled when he heard the stories. So because somebody's shirt has eye design, you say it is ghost eye? Abeg, don't disturb me with village superstition in the city, he told the complainants. But as Choba grew restless, the whispers around Mama Nidu's shop became harder to ignore. Something was not right with Adako's signature, and everyone knew it. One morning, the morning that changed everything, chaos erupted in Mama Nidu's shop. Customers stormed her shop, furious about what her clothes had done to them. Ofunne barged in first, her swollen tongue hanging out, drooling as she shouted insults she couldn't control. Ebube followed, smashing her mirrors. Nicholas stormed in too, with his sharp tongue snapping like a hungry dog, while Ede staggered behind, clutching his head and arguing with voices only he could hear. The shop became a madhouse. And then the horror truly began. The clothes they wore twisted, trying to reattach the body parts to their owners. Ofunne's gown sprouted real tongues that licked her arms. Ebube's eyes blinked widely as eyes popped open along the sleeves. Nicholas' agbada snapped with biting mouth, and Ede's outfit bulged violently, with another head trying to push out from his chest. Mama Nidu clapped her hands and laughed nervously. Ah, see fashion, no. I told you fashion has consequences. But no one was laughing. Just then, Inspector Oti arrived, still smirking as if the whole matter was beneath him. So this is the demon tailor you people are crying about, he muttered. But when he turned to the rack, one of the dresses blinked at him. He froze and his mouth dropped. For the first time, the inspector believed the rumors. That night, the community of Choba gathered. Mama Chisom stood in front of Adako's signature with Bible in one hand and bell in the other. Behind her, a crowd held lanterns and candles, chanting prayers. It was a midnight procession to end the terror once and for all. As they prayed, the shop shook violently. Fabrics slittered across the floor like snakes. Dresses flapped their sleeves like wings trying to fly away. Customers' coarse clothes clung tightly to their bodies, refusing to come off no matter how hard they pulled. Mama Nido tried to escape, but the sewing machine rattled and came alive. Its needle clattered like teeth, and its threads shot out like ropes. Before anyone could blink, the thread wrapped around her arms and legs, dragging her back to the machine. She screamed, trying to break free, but the thread spread faster, cocooning her in layers of clothes. Her voice grew muffled as her body disappeared into a bundle of fabric. The machine groaned louder, swallowing her whole. In her final words, she said, "Who will stitch you all now?" And then, with a sharp spark, the shop burst into airy blue flames. The mannequins melted, the fabrics wailed, and the whole building went up in flames that burned without smoke. Life in Choba suddenly returned to normal, or so it seemed. Mama Nidu's shop was gone, but her cost wasn't finished. Mama Chisom, however, told anyone who cared to listen, "In this Nigeria, even fashion will unalive somebody. Forget demons in the village, oh. Check your tailors first." After the incident, no one in Choba ever asked for custom embroidery again. Thank you so much for watching and stay blessed.
Thank you for watching this video. Like and subscribe for more videos.